played down this disease over and over again. We're just beginning to touch the surface. Take a look.
People should be more concerned right now with the flu in this country.
A lot of people are concerned about the coronavirus because they're hearing a lot of news about it right now. But the reality is, comparing it to the flu, for example, it's not even close to being at that stage.
Sandra, you were telling us the last hour that there's an important context we need to keep this in, and that is that the flu is more deadly.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the ironies, I think, that always comes up with this. Take a look at the numbers.
How worried should Americans be about coronavirus?
Coronavirus is not going to cause a major risk in the United States.
Half of the people in America do not get a flu shot, and the flu right now is far deadlier. So if you're freaked out at all about the coronavirus, you should be more concerned about the flu, and you can actually do something about it and get a flu shot. I'm not blaming them. Facts changed all throughout this crisis, but they were wrong. The president on January 31st was right. They can't ever say, you know what, I didn't agree with it, but he was right. His travel ban, quarantines, aggressive action. Well, 10 days after the first known case in the country, it saved lives. How many, we'll never be able to calculate. Naturally, right on cue, the media mob, they shift their smear tactics. Suddenly, according to the mob, instead of overreacting, the president was actually underreacting. Now he's overreacting. They can't make up their mind. February 26th, the Times ran another unhinged op-ed. Let's call it Trump virus. If you're feeling awful, you know who to blame. March 8th, fake news, CNN. Let's call the Trump virus Trump's Katrina. March 9th, Washington Post. That would be Eric Pop the Pimples newspaper. Oh, it's Trump's Chernobyl. March 13th, the Nation claiming Republican xenophobia is going to make this pandemic much worse. And just this week over there at MSNBC, one of their so-called genius conspiracy theorists saying tens of thousands of people will die because of Trump's coronavirus incompetence. Okay, make it up as you go along. Forget facts, forget truth, forget that there is a nationwide emergency. The media has been, continues to be, obsessed with using anything to bludgeon President Trump politically. We do have an election in 208 days. Don't think that's not playing a part in what they're thinking and how they're talking and what they feel. They don't even want to cover the president's press conferences, important information to the American people in the middle of a pandemic and a national emergency. Wow, they must really hate him a lot, as we've learned over the last 3+ years.
There are tens of thousands of people who will die in the country, or some of them have already died. More are still going to die because of Donald Trump's incompetence and lack of leadership.
Here we have a president who is exploiting a national crisis to move forward his own agenda, his own revenge, his own profit.
He's still acting reckless and unmoored. He still can't rise to the occasion.
What we saw was a hijacking of the task force press conference by a president determined to rewrite the history of his early and reprehensibly irresponsible response to this virus.
This was a 9/11 level failure of the federal government. It was. It needs to be talked about and covered and scrutinized that way.
Here in the United States, we are still not doing what we need to do to fight this deadly virus because of a complete lack of leadership.
Reckless, unmoored, 9/11 failure, I'd say that would be the media mob and the Democrats too busy impeaching to go along with the travel ban, the quarantine, the extra travel bans, the subsequent travel bans. In order to justify these attacks, some of the media seem to be rooting for the pandemic to get worse. They're not part of the solution. They're not helping in any way. In reality, the curve now shows the signs of flattening, hospitalizations thankfully going down, medicine from testing to treatment is catching up. Here now, one former New York Times reporter who believes that this has been overhyped. He's calling out the media's BS. He's the author of Tell Your Children, Alex Berenson. I will say this. I've been reading your Twitter accounts, following you very closely like others are. You're pretty fascinating to me. You certainly are willing to say things that people find controversial, and I don't mind. Here's my question, though. If we didn't have the ban, Alex, if we didn't have the quarantines, if we didn't have the mitigation efforts, the numbers would be dramatically higher. You have to agree that that's true.
So Sean, let me say, first of all, I'm a registered political independent, and I really do try to stay out of the politics of this. My concern about this in the last few weeks, and believe it or not, I was extremely concerned about this a month ago, 2 months ago. My concern about this in the last few weeks, as I've tried to articulate on Twitter, is twofold. I would say, first of all, we were first told that the reason we needed to lock down the country was to flatten the curve, and that really meant that the hospitals in the United States would not be overrun, and that and there was talk that every hospital in the country, would be out of beds, that would be out of ventilators, that would be out of ICUs, and it is completely clear that outside of New York City, and possibly a couple hospitals, in a couple other areas, that is not true. Hospitals are actually emptier now than they were a month ago. There has been no surge. Okay, so that's A, and B. My concern has been that the public health consequences, as well as the economic consequences, as well as the societal consequences of locking down the whole country, have been massively understated. And let me just give you one example of that. In kids, children, almost anybody under 30 is at no risk to this, no serious risk from this virus. I'm not saying that it
well,
can
Alex,
never
hang on a second.
but in the, hold on, let me finish.
That changed though. Hold on a second. That changed in the middle, because you're right. Everybody was telling us if you don't have a compromised immune system or underlying health issues, if you're younger, you're gonna be fine. But that changed, and if you looked at the hospitalizations in New York,
that children are
those numbers changed.
And by shutting down schools, we haven't just denied children an education. For a lot of kids who might be in abusive homes, who might be in homes with parents who are drug users, we're denying those children really any eye on them from an adult who might not be a problem for them. So my thought on this is that the lockdowns, we need to talk about what the costs really are, and at the same time, we need to really talk about what's happening in our medical system. And New York City has had a bad month, and nobody would disagree with that. But if you look at the rest of the country, the surge has not been there.
But would you at least agree, had we not done certain things, it's simple math. Starting with the travel ban, I think if people are intellectually honest in retrospect, we say Donald Trump was right 10 days after the first identified case. Look, Andrew Cuomo was saying on March 2nd, oh, we're New Yorkers, our hospital system's better. That was March 2nd. Then he's screaming just a couple of weeks later, I need 30,000 ventilators. Then we find out he was told to buy them for this exact week that we're living through, and he chose not to. So a lot of mistakes.
But the good news is New York State will not need 30,000 ventilators. It will not need 30,000 ventilators.
It won't.
I agree.
Thank
The
God.
travel ban, in retrospect, looks like a very good idea. And we should have done much more in February. We should have ramped up testing. But the question is, where are we now? And is there a way to look at different regions, look at their hospital capacity, say, is New York different than Houston? Is Houston different than San Francisco? This is a big country. Even the Chinese, they opened up outside of Wuhan and Hubei much earlier than people realize.
I'm more suspicious. Listen, I think you're making points.
Questions about the data.
Would you agree with me that the answer now, going forward, is we've got to get this country up and running, and testing is the key, especially Abbott, their 5-minute test. Do you agree on that? And we have 10 seconds.
I would say testing is the key. We want the serological testing. We want to know how many people have already gotten this. There's some interesting data out of Germany suggesting that 15% of people in a randomized survey actually have already gotten this and recovered from it, which would suggest that the fatality rate maybe is a little bit lower than we think. We need data.
More testing
we need a plan. We need to say, you know what? If the hospitals are this full and cases are going this way, we can open this and this. We can open workplaces. And if they're this full, maybe we can open retail and we can open hospitality. We need metrics and we need reporters who are going to ask the president and his governors these questions, and not just make things look as bad as possible.
I like your iconoclastic, and you're definitely making people think, and it takes a lot of guts doing what you're doing. I don't fully agree with it, but I appreciate you being with us. Thank you. All right, here now, more facts without fear. Host of the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Oz, how do we open up the country without what you have told me is it's guaranteed a rebound? How do we do that? I think the key is testing. I would like to mass produce the 5-minute Abbott test.
Well, let's start with testing, because you asked me to get some follow-up from Abbott. I got through to them, so just before I went on air with you, I got some numbers. They're making about 50,000 a day of those 5-minute tests that you love. That's 350,000 tests a week. They're ramping that up to about 500,000 tests a week by June. And don't forget, they have the 6.5-hour test, which is not as good, obviously, because you got to probably wait overnight to get the result back. But later that day, early the next morning, you can get the result. There's a million of those tests going on every week. So you put them together, we're getting close to 1.5 million tests that you can get a result back.
All right, let me ask
certainly,
you.
Within 12 hours.
Why can't look the people at Abbott? Thank you for what you've done. This is so helpful to the country. Now, can we also subcontract out to 15 other companies that they can produce it based on Abbott's formula? That would help open the city of New York much faster. I don't know how we're going to open up the airline industry or restaurants. That's more complicated.
But let's go through this. I spoke today to a couple of hundred folks in the insurance industry, healthcare plans. Here's the basic summary. You need a digital tool so that everyone can sort of double check reminders that if these symptoms exist, you got to get checked. And you get sent to the closest testing center, and we got to have them all over the place. You're right. For now, 1.5 million tests a week might actually be enough for us to crunch through in the major urban areas. And this is important. Once you have that testing, you're going to have to help those people get the care they need to get the heck out of the system. You better help them remind folks that they may have been in contact with so they can contain them. The Germans have a hammer and dance model, which is basically whack-a-mole. Whenever you see a little forest fire about to emerge, but it's still a brush fire, you put it out, and then you dance for a while and decide if you need to do anything more. And I'm going to offer something right now. I think we ought to have a domestic Peace Corps. You know, we have all these unemployed young people now because of this shutdown. Let's get some of them trained up in public health. Let's give our local officials a little bit of support so they can actually coach people on how to get folks who are infected, healthy again, and back into the workforce. That way, the governors have a plan B instead of shutting the state down again as soon as there's an outbreak. Because, as you mentioned, we will have outbreaks. It's going to be a rolling process. Everyone that I've spoken to that I trust agrees with this. Until a year from now, when we get a vaccine, we need a plan.
All right, Dr. Oz, thank you. Got to get the country up and open and safely. All right, when we come back, Senator Graham, what he's telling China to do. Also, the great one, Mark Levin, and an incredible new ad against Joe Biden about China. Call roll, boys, in straight ahead.